Hi everyone, welcome to our talk, mid of the afternoon. So as said, I hope you had a coffee and you are ready for some more to learn, to exercise your brain. So our talk is going to be about building an organizational brain, or if you will, how to become a better or a learning organization. My name is Eduardo Silva, and I'm passionate about continuous learning. I always loved learning. My career was on academia, researching software engineering, and then building products, software products. Very focused on technical aspects. But over the last, I think already almost 10 years, I started realizing that to build good software products is much more than just those technical details. We need to be able to learn, design, and decide more effectively as organizations. And today I'm really pleased to do this talk with my good friend Avraham.
I'm Avraham. I'm an architect. I manage teams of architects, but really at heart, I'm a teacher. I like teaching. I like teaching about teaching. I like understanding how people learn, how people share information. And fortunately for me, a lot of what an architect does is teach. Architects are constantly, we could draw squares and draw lines between them, and that's part of what we do, but a lot of what we do is share our thoughts, share our role model with other people. And our particular story starts here in Berlin 2 years ago. I gave a talk about culture, about how culture helps us learn, and Eduardo gave a great talk about sustainable learning. And shortly after the conference, I went up to Eduardo and said, we're thinking similar thoughts, and we have a lot of ideas. Let's do something together. It could be interesting, it could be fun. And it was both. And the value of these conferences is not just to come and hear other people talk. That's, of course, a value. But another value is we meet each other and we have chances to collaborate and to learn from each other and to share ideas. And a lot more happens outside of the conference room than happens inside the conference room. So that's me.
Yes. So we will be talking about how to build that organizational brain, but we want to take a step back and think why actually we need better organizational brains or improved organizational learning. I didn't know that Sin and some other talks in the morning were already motivating our own talk, which is pretty great to see more people talking about this. But I'm going to use this simple representation here to give you some motivation on why learning in our organizations is becoming increasingly important. So just think of the rate of change of technology, innovation, of market expectations. And I was born at the beginning of the 80s, so I'm still one of those that was born without a computer. So I was I think 12 years old or 13 when I got my first computer. So I had some time. That's not unimaginable today, right? So kids are seeing a computer or a phone much earlier on. So we had a lot of these technical innovations happening, and they didn't stop, right? So 2000-somethings, we had cloud. These days, AI and more are to come. However, the way our operating models have evolved, the rate of change there has not been so dramatic, right? And as Sin said in the morning, a lot of the work and a lot of the things that we are doing today are not anymore things that are predictable. And for the ones that don't know, this is the Kinevin framework. So here on this side, you have domains of problems that are predictable. I'm not going to go in a lot of details, but what many organizations are doing today is they have work on this more unpredictable, complex domain where things are less predictable. So you are trying to build, for example, a new recommendation engine for your web shop. You will do a lot of experiments to see what works and not, because we just don't know how customers will respond to that. And the operating models behind the companies doing that, they are still using ways of doing work that assumes that things are predictable and we can plan them and we know how this will pan out. So this is leading to a sort of a mismatch. So we keep on using these operating models that assume complicated domains or predictable when we are operating on more complex domains and things are changing faster. So there is a lot of motivation there. But you could argue, okay, Dr. Eduardo, the innovations are out there, so why are you complaining about that, right? And this is where I think we need to be very sensitive, because I think, and many other people are seeing this, that we are achieving that by stretching our teams and our organizations, by adding very complex processes, throwing people to the problem to actually be able to bring these innovations to the market. And as Conway's law will grant us, this is Conway's law, not the inverse yet, that complexity of the communication, the work that we need to do, will end up encoded in the systems we are building. The technical systems, but also the social systems, actually. So more and more, the organizations become more and more complex to handle things. And the outcome is that learning and understanding what is the next innovation we need to bring becomes increasingly more complex. So this is, I've been playing with this idea that what we are doing by not changing the way we operate in our organizations and having better learning, we are creating increasingly more socio-technical, accidental complexity and depth. So I explicitly talked about socio-technical here, not just technical depth. It's also the organization becomes more complex. And this has a lot of effects. So it will be more costly to bring new innovations to the market, to change things. We create more waste. It's the sustainability of actually being able to evolve these things also decreases. The ability to learn also decreases. And the happiness of people working in the middle of that mess also decreases. So what we want to put a grain into improving this today is by looking at the aspect of what about if we start investing more and more in our organizations into the ability of learning. We think that's a fundamental thing for us to be able to get out of this position where we are today. And that should allow us to maybe not do that jump so drastic as we have there, but to improve the way we can operate as organizations. There will be more ingredients in this talk, in this conference. We already heard some great ideas to also improve on this, but Avraham and I will focus on learning.
So one of the great things I learned when preparing this talk, I actually learned this morning, is that you could have two clickers plugged into one computer. So that's a good thing. Thank you, Eduardo, for teaching me that. So organizational learning, and in order to understand organizational learning, I want to dive a bit into what is really an organization. What do we mean when we say organization, and what do we mean when we say learning? And then we could combine the two and maybe have organizational learning. As a species, I consider us all belonging to the same species, we're able to do amazing things. We're able to do unbelievable things. We're able to build particle accelerators, and we're able to build pyramids, and we're able to build highways and the internet, and send a human to the moon. And we're able to do all those things not because we are faster than any other animal, or stronger than any other animal, or bigger or more adaptive to our environment. We're not any of those. We have opposable thumbs, which is a useful thing to have, but that's not what really gives us our power. What gives us our power are three very unique gifts. We have motivation. We want things beyond food and sex and shelter. We want fame. We want influence. We want to leave. We want to make a difference. We want to accomplish great things. We have imagination. I am capable of imagining a future world, a different world, a world in which a particle accelerator exists, and how we will get there, and how we will do it, and what we need in order to make it happen. And we are capable of communicating that enables cooperation. And once we want, and we're capable of imagination, and we are capable of cooperation, what we can accomplish is almost limitless. And there are three very important inventions that support all this. And I might say that they are the greatest inventions of all time. The inventions are money, writing, and storytelling. And when I talk about money, money is the tokenization of labor, but it's really the tokenization of motivation. So in order for us to cooperate, we have to want the same thing, or our motivations at least have to be aligned. They can't be aligned. I want a yacht, he wants a luxury watch, and she wants to retire rich, and she wants to buy a home out in the country. But we all want money. And money allows us to align our motivation. Writing is the tokenization of language, but it's really the tokenization of knowledge. Once I have writing, I'm able to share knowledge, able to communicate it at scale meaning over time and over space. And storytelling allows us to share our imagination. I could imagine something. Telling you a vision is not the same as telling you a story. You'll remember a story. A story could last decades or millennia or even tens of millennia. Now, there are two other inventions that I'm not including here, or two other things that I'm not including here. One invention is the invention of language or culture. And I don't really consider these inventions. They evolved. Language and culture is already part of our hardware. It's not something that somebody got up one day and said, let's invent culture, let's invent language. It's deeper than that. And another very important invention, if I had to write a fourth one, I would put it here, the invention of bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is an amazing invention because it allows us to scale cities. It allows us to live together as a society. It allows us to do amazing things, but they're not here. So those are the three big inventions. And now that we understand how we're enabled, I want to break it down a little and talk about organizational learning, which is greater than organizations and greater than learning. Spoke a bit about, and we'll speak a bit about both. And I want to dive into really what is learning. When I say learning, I want to learn about what is learning, and I want to understand what is understanding. So Eduardo talked about the gap. Learning is always about bridging a gap. The gap between the world as I imagine it, or the world as I perceive it, and the world as it is. And there's always going to be a gap between the world as I perceive it and the world as it is. No model is really perfect. No understanding is perfect. But by learning, I'm slowly minimizing that gap. And that's an important thing. The more my understanding of the world, and the world in the broadest sense of the term, means people and the domain and the environment and the technology and the tools available to me. The more I manage to narrow the gap, the more I could say the more I learn, the more I know. But that's not yet understanding. Understanding is the ability to apply the knowledge. When I understand something, I could apply the knowledge. And by applying the knowledge, I mean I could recognize commonalities between certain areas, or I could recognize differences or inconsistencies. I know how to ask questions, and not informative questions, but application questions, questions that show real understanding. I know how to reword something and explain it to somebody else that doesn't have the same context or background or assumptions or beliefs or values that I have, and I know how to explain it in a way that she will understand it. That is considered understanding. That is not knowledge. And I know how to innovate. I know how to find new applications and innovations of my knowledge. Then I could claim that I could understand it. And if I look at the flow would be something like this. I have information. Information is in the library, in the book, in the database. Information is not knowledge. It's at least not as far as I'm concerned. Somebody else created that information. For him, it was knowledge. I convert that information into knowledge by learning. The process of learning is the process of converting information into knowledge. You learn. Learn is an elaborate process. Then I want to convert my knowledge into understanding. How do I convert knowledge into understanding? I think about it, I discuss it, I argue about it, I experiment with it. There's a lot that happens in order to convert knowledge into understanding. We all understand this intuitively, but it's not an easy thing to describe. But I understand it, even though it's hard for me to describe it. And then, so that's at the individual level. But if I talk about at the organization level, so once as an organization, if we have shared knowledge, we understand things together, then we could create a shared understanding. We can't have a shared understanding unless we know the same things. We know the same things, we could understand it in the same way or understand it in the aggregate in the same way, and then we could start cooperating. Now, cooperating doesn't depend on all us knowing the same information and understanding the same information. But it depends on us as the aggregate knowing all the relevant information and understanding all the relevant information. So as an aggregate, we are able to understand that. And I'll talk a bit later about what I mean when I say the group, the collective knows. And I want to talk a bit about now the organizational brain. Organizations don't have brains, people have brains, but it's a metaphor that we use because it's useful. It's useful to us. Now, whenever we learn as individuals, and we all know this, we have to understand it and we have to retain it. Whenever we study for a test in school or in university, we're faced with two challenges: to understand the material and to remember, to retain the material. You retain it. Learning and understanding are slightly different, and they're different at the individual and they're different at the organization. How do I learn as an individual? I read, I listen, I practice, I study, I experience the world. That's how I learn. How do I remember that? I rehearse it maybe, I practice it. Practice appears in both. It's both a knowing and a retention method. I write it down, because if I write down something, I could then, the pad of paper or the computer is an extension of my internal memory. As an organization, we do these things slightly different. As an organization, we learn not by reading, we learn by discussing, we learn by arguing, we learn by practicing, we learn by playing. Playing is an important thing. That's why children from a very, very young age should be encouraged to play and to play a lot, because that's how they learn about themselves, about their place in the world, about how to trust or not trust others. We experience things as a group. That's the importance of fun. How do I retain as an organization? We have to have knowledge repositories, and we have to have culture and stories and rituals and rules. Rituals and rules, in some sense, capture organizational knowledge. We do things that way because that's how we retain it. So people kept laws of hygiene, let's say, or rules of hygiene 20,000 years before they understood germ theory. The knowledge of, if you touch dirty food and don't wash your hands, you get sick and die, was a knowledge that was communicated through rules of washing your hands much more effectively than it was communicated through the explanation of germ theory, just to bring an example. So, Eduardo.
Yeah. So for the remainder of the talk, what we will do is to explore sort of three angles that are very important to build this organizational brain. We will look at culture, structure, which are both very intertangled with each other. And last but not the least, we will look at return on investment, which is typically something that people have some difficulties when it comes to learning. So let's start by looking at challenges, and Avraham will tell us about cultural.
Culture is our collection of values and beliefs and traditions and rituals, and all these come into culture. Culture is always a group behavior. No individual has culture. Only groups have culture. And culture is an extremely powerful enabler. We could do a lot when we have culture. One of the reasons that immigrants feel themselves a little disempowered or impotent when they come into a new society is because they don't integrate into the culture. It's hard for them to be influential when you don't fit into the culture. And culture can be, in addition to being an enabler, it can be an inhibitor. Because if we do things just because we believe them or value them, but they're not helpful to us, culture becomes a bit of an inhibitor. And culture is the main reason we could use the word we. And we is qualitatively and quantitatively different than the words you and I. We, when we say we do something, we are going for a walk. So it doesn't mean that you and I are going for a walk. We have established a new collective identity, and now we are going to do something. We is a word of identity. By the way, in my playing with ChatGPT, it's been mentioned here quite a bit. ChatGPT sometimes uses the word I, and I don't mind ChatGPT using the word I. I understand what it means. But once in a while, ChatGPT uses the word we, and that really rubs me the wrong way. Who is we, right? You and I don't belong to the same collective in any way. Well, who's we? And culture can't really be dictated. And any social experiment in dictating culture usually ends very badly. Culture can be influenced. So we might have a fashion leader, or we might have some teacher or evangelizer or thought leader, and he can't shape the culture, and she can't shape the culture, but they might be able to influence. And here are some of the challenges that culture presents to organizational learning. These are cultural challenges to organizational learning. So first of all, we always emulate what our leaders do and what our leaders value and not what they preach. And if our leaders do not value learning, no matter how much they say they value learning, if they do not really value learning, we are incentivized and motivated to follow our leaders' actions and our leaders' incentive structures rather than what they tell us to do. That, especially in an organization that controls the reward structure. That's the way these things work. If our incentives or motivations are not aligned and we don't see things in the same way, we don't share a common story, it's hard for us to learn together. So if we want to learn a dance, let's say we want to set up a flash mob and do something fun together, or we want to do something, we first have to agree on what the experience is going to be. Otherwise, we won't be able to choreograph it. We won't be able to learn it. And we have to see ourselves culturally as a learning collective. We like learning together. We value it. It's fun. If we don't have that, it'll be hard for us to work together. We have to believe, as a collective, we have to believe that there's long-term value in learning. If we believe in a culture of ignorance, or we believe in a culture that does not celebrate learning or does not value learning, it'll be hard to get learning in the organization. So the organization, the collective story, the collective ethos has to be one of there's long-term value in learning. Learning is a good thing. One interesting thing is in some organizations, there's often a culture of avoiding blame, avoiding having to apologize, avoiding having to you be responsible for the money losing face or losing money or losing customers. In one fundamental element of learning is the ability to admit mistakes, the ability to admit to not knowing, the ability to admit to having done something wrong. People that never do anything wrong and never make mistakes and never have anything to apologize for are not very good learners. And in a culture where nobody's able to admit mistakes or apologize or learn, you will not get a lot of learning done. You just won't be able to. And people that feel disempowered, people that feel that their knowledge is irrelevant. I'll learn a new pattern, I'll learn a new way of doing things, the team will try it out and practice it out, and then I'll go to management, and management will say, no, we're not interested, we'll do things the way we always did it. And if there's a culture that does not encourage experimentation, does not value my learning, it will be hard for us to gain knowledge and to learn together. So a question, I mean, as we're speaking, does anybody here in the audience have perhaps a story or incident or anecdote of something where organizational learning could have happened, would have happened, but there was some cultural impediment? It's not that you didn't have the right book or didn't have the right knowledge. There was some cultural impediment in the way of learning happened. If anybody has something that they feel comfortable sharing.
Thank you, Trond.
Sorry, I could not. Every time a team is not able to govern their own metrics, like for example, Jira.
Could you say that again? Every time?
A team is not allowed to control their own metrics. Like for example, Jira, the throughput in Jira or burn down or whatever. As long as there's somebody outside of the team, they're not learning, controlling their information.
That is an excellent, excellent example. I want to hear if there's any more, and then maybe I'll relate to that very briefly. Yep. Thank you.
Oh.
Maybe you will have the possibility as well. We are currently in... what am I doing wrong? Can you hear me like this? So I will just not use this thing. We are merging together as one company from the group perspective. And in this time, I personally think we need to learn more than we're just doing right now in our small companies, but also in the fields around that, maybe a field which does not exist right now. But we have an organizational method which basically says that we should orient our learning experiences whether they have a positive impact for our customers right now. So we kind of have the problem to learn something completely new because we have to argue all the time that it helps our customers.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to answer the JIRA comment, and then Eduardo is going to address the structural comment. Thank you for that. One of the tools necessary in order for learning, organizational learning to happen is for retrospection, for my ability to look myself into the mirror and say I made a mistake. And for you, the collective you, people I work with, to trust me that I am capable of introspection. I'm capable of being honest with myself. And if I'm not capable of admitting my mistakes, and you don't believe in me that I am capable of admitting my mistakes, then it'll be very, very hard to learn anything together because I'm operating in an environment that doesn't have any trust. I don't believe in myself, and I don't believe that you believe in me, and you don't believe in myself. And that is a great example of a behavior or of a rule or of a regulation which really reflects a deeper lack of collective mutual trust.
I think I will answer the second question with my next point. If not now, it will be in a second. If I don't answer it, I will get back to you, which is about structure. So I think it relates with the topic of if you have two organizations coming together, those structures and the things behind that will influence your ability to learn. So, because, just building up on that idea, the way we are structured as organizations will affect the possible dynamics we can explore. So here you can see a typical HR structure that you may find in some big corporations, right? So the boss on top and then all of these branches of departments, etc. And that will influence our ability to the dynamics that we will have, right? So the formal and the informal, right? The communications we must have with the other people on the other branches. And organizational learning is not different. Particularly, as we heard today already a few times, many organizations are actually structured are like management-oriented structures. So we have here on sort of reddish, the product group, there the tech organization, tech group, there the marketing groups. And they are structured to sort of work on their own. They tend to be managed and optimized to work more locally and often competing with each other. So I think this is already touching a bit on your question. How many times at least I have heard, oh, the product people are coming already with these requirements and this and that, and we need to do that, because we don't understand. They were working somewhere and then brought something to the technical organization, same for marketing, etc. So these silos, they create friction to learning and to the actual effective creation of value. Right? Because our customers are not interested on how we play ping pong with each other. They are interested on actually having a product that works well for them. And that learning will require these different silos to learn what should we be building, how we should be set it up technically, how should we market it. So this requires these different functions and silos to work with each other. And when we are organized in this way, things are much more difficult. And this is happening because we are incentivizing, we are creating these structures and incentivizing the people working on those different silos to work in that fashion, right? So the managers there on top, they get promoted because they manage more people, or the technical organization is doing well. I'm not caring about the rest. So we may have the best, for example, we may have the best DevOps teams there in the middle, making them amazing, but if the rest of the things around them, right, so the way we are experimenting and talking with our customers, we are marketing, if that's not aligned, then we will have challenges. The last point that we want to talk is about return on investment. And we already had this morning a bit of some taste of that in Michael Kloot's talk. So when we talk about return on investment and around learning is, so in order for us to learn, we need to spend time. We have effort that will happen that may not be immediate. The outcome may not be immediate. However, as we were talking on the structure side of things, if most organizations want to have quantifiable, predictable, short-term outcomes on the investment that we have, and also are just looking at their local silo, this will bring a lot of challenges for us to start learning. To, for example, the question we had, how do we look outside of what today is the most normal things that we should be learning about, when we are seeing that other things are coming and are so important? So learning can be an investment that may take time to happen, and sometimes the financial return may not be immediate, or the customer value that we are generating. For example, I worked on an organization where this was a few years back when everyone was moving to cloud. Now people are moving back, but we were learning about cloud, right? So, we had 100+ teams. So you definitely don't want to have, you want everyone to be able to learn, but if you have some people that already know about that in that organization, you should give space to that people to help others, right? But this doesn't happen everywhere, and people don't immediately see that this investment will pay off big time in a few months or even years. So that mindset can be a challenge for many organizations. Avraham.
It's more than belief. It's actually being able to conceptualize or imagine the future. A lot of us believe or know that global warming is a very real thing, and that by investing in the science and the technology and the cultural behaviors, we might be able to save our future generations or save the planet. But I need to drive my gas guzzler now. And for me to invest, and it's so hard to invest in environmental technologies because the investment is heavy now and the return is in the distant future. It's the same reason that it's hard for us to save for our pension, or it's hard for us to invest in studying for a PhD, because it's a lot of hard work now, and the reward only comes a couple of years down the line. And one of the most inspiring people that I could think of was the first person who went from being a collector, hunter, gatherer to becoming a farmer. And what this person did, he's an anonymous person, an ancestor of ours that lived a couple thousand years ago. He took part of his food, and instead of eating it, he put it in the ground and prayed for rain. And he was able to get a bigger yield the next season or the following season. He was the first person that had the idea that maybe instead of eating something, I could invest. He was the first investor. And probably many investors failed until one of them finally succeeded at actually getting more food for the next year. And then man discovered that instead of collecting, man, by the meaning, I mean human, discovered that instead of collecting their food, they could raise their own food. But it is very, very, very hard. And return on investment is one of the major impediments to investing in learning. And we're going to discuss now what are some good practices. And just like we structured the challenges around culture, structure, and ROI, we're going to structure the good practices around culture, structure, and ROI. So what are some of the good cultural practices? And again, we can't change a culture, we can't shape a culture, but we could behave within a culture in ways that nudge or modify or slightly shift the culture in a desirable way. So first of all, be culturally aware. Learn about your culture. Learn about your organization or culture. People that are culturally aware are curious about how does knowledge happen, how do we learn things, are slowly able to start influencing that. Use the word we. We know, not I know, we know. That encourages cultural identity and cultural awareness. And tell a story about learning. Stories are the best way that we know for preserving and assimilating a culture. All cultures that we have are based on stories. Every religion, every nationality, everything is based on a story. Tell stories about, I didn't know it, I learned it, I know it, I knew it, I applied it, and something good happened. Now, since culture is very much, especially in the organization, is a follow by example thing, people at all levels need to learn. If the leader or manager or senior or boss says, we are a learning organization, we like learning new things, but he never admits to being wrong or she never admits to learning something she never knew, you will not have a learning organization. You need to at all levels. And one of the qualities that an architect needs, again, because I'm an architect who does domain-driven design a lot. One of the qualities that an architect needs, and if she doesn't have, she should identify, she should build and cultivate, is the ability to admit to not knowing, to learning something, to making a mistake. If there's an argument in the room, why did this happen? Why are we in this bad situation that we're in? And the architect comes in and she says, I misjudged. I didn't study deeply enough. I didn't think about this. I didn't have all the data and I was wrong. That is such a useful and constructive temperament to say. Trust other people's knowledge. Very often, very senior, very smart people who know a lot, when somebody else comes in and says, I learned it and I know how to do it because I'm smarter than them and more intelligent than them and more experienced than them, I tend not to trust them. Trust them. If people are trusted, they will live up to that trust. They will live up to the trust. And part of the retrospective is, what did we learn? What did we learn from this? Celebrate. A lot of our cultures happen by celebration. We have holidays, we have rituals that we celebrate things that we value. If we celebrate marriage in some societies because we think it's an important thing. If we celebrate childbirth in other societies, that's because we believe that having a family is a good thing. If we celebrate wealth or promotion in other societies, that's our way of saying this is important. If we celebrate birthdays, that's our way of saying we believe that growing up and maturing is a good thing. So celebrate learning. Yeah, he knows something, she knows something. It's a good thing. Have internal platforms, conferences, and ways to promote learning together. Be curious. I don't know how this works. There was a story once, a great philosopher was asked, what is worse, ignorance or indifference? And she answered, I don't know and I don't care. So don't say, I don't know and I don't care. That's the wrong answer, right? Be curious about things, care and know about these things. When the child comes home from work and dad asks her, what did you learn today in school? It's dad's way of saying, what you go to school for, what I'm curious about is what you did. And if you went to school, not who stole your sandwich or who beat you up in the schoolyard, but what did you learn? That is a good thing. That shows our children we value it. So at a retrospective, it's a legitimate question to ask, not only what did we do, but what did we learn? Or if something interesting comes up, if there's an idea that comes up and we ask, where did that come from? How did that happen? Where did that idea come from? That's a good thing. Learning is a first-class citizen. It's not like filling out the timesheet or writing a status report. You learn as part of the activity that you do. It's not a baggage or a tax. It's an investment. Managers have to be incentivized to learn, and we have to encourage our teams, and maybe they'll be even rewarded or KPI'd or whatever the acronym is for how much learning happened. And of course, if somebody says, I helped somebody else, we should never penalize and say, no, that's not your job. You're not a mentor. You're not a coach. You're not a teacher. Focus on your job. That's a bad thing to do. Anybody that teaches anything is welcome and is doing a good thing. Helping each other is a very good thing. So those are a few comments about culture.
Let's get into structure. Some good practices around structure. And just to be clear, we mean good practice. So these are things that in general are tend to lead to good outcomes. So these are not best practices. I want to just make that very clear. And one of the things is just to address the first challenge I was talking about on this part. How can we start moving from this sort of organization towards something more like that? So people that know team topologies may recognize these sort of shapes, but it's the idea of how can we listen to our customers and be able to maybe mix these different disciplines that are needed to actually understand what's going on, and then come up with something that would be interesting for this customer, that would allow us to maximize our value exchange with the customer, make them happy, and also for us to do that more sustainably. So this is a very difficult thing. It's extremely difficult. I'm not saying this is easy, but we need to start keeping this in mind. We, and especially organizational leaders. Another important practice is this practice of how can we allow for our structures to support effective learning. So some points that Avraham was already talking about. How can we allow for people that know about something to help others to do better, to improve? And here again, it's sort of a team topologies diagram. And what you see here on the very left is that the team on top is doing their work. Team on the bottom, they are also doing their work, but they are missing a certain skill that the first team has. So can we allow for the team on top to facilitate, that's an interaction mode from team topologies, can we allow them to help the other team to upskill or address that missing capability they have? Do we allow for this to happen in our organizations? Or are we saying, no, you don't go there because you need to work on the Jira ticket that Trond was talking about? So those metrics need to keep up, and we don't allow for that to happen. Because when we do that, what happens is that knowledge starts, that learning, that knowledge starts flowing around, and the organization as a whole starts becoming more effective on building what we need to build for our customers. So the knowledge that a team has propagates to other teams in the organization. And something else on structure is that maybe that structure that I showed you is not the one that we should have next year, because maybe something changed on the market, something changed on our organization, our business objectives, whatever, and we need to evolve. You probably cannot read what's here on the bottom. It doesn't matter. I just want you to show some shades of changes on this organization over 20 years. So this is bol.com, which is like the Dutch Amazon. I worked there for a few years, and I use this diagram in many of my talks. But for the structure aspect, what I wanted to show you is that this organization is very focused on promoting a culture of learning, and always see how can they evolve effectively to be competitive on the market, but also have a happy organization. So on the beginning of 2000s, you see like the waterfall, the monoliths, central architects taking decisions. That was probably okay at that time. E-commerce was just starting. Things were moving slow. They were small. They could do that. But on the 2010s or so, maybe you remember, we had an explosion of all of these online shopping. So we had to have different ways of learning. So we had to change our structure, the way we did our technical architecture, but also how we had our teams owning that and being able to take decisions here at the bottom to be able to architect themselves. In time, we grew so much that we couldn't anymore just think about single teams. We had to think about groups of teams that were owning something together. And that also led to a structural change in the organization. So this will be happening all the time. And we will only be able to do this if the organization has incentives for that to happen. So managers and people that, whoever is working there, needs to be incentivized to look and be able to drive that organizational structures changes. Last but not the least, so return on investment. This is always a tricky one, but in general, the key thing that should start happening, and we start talking more and more about this, is that we should move into, say, a more sustainable return on investment mindset. And learning should be part of that. And this sounds very theoretical, but for some people, maybe you know about beyond the budgeting. Anyone has heard about beyond the budgeting? A few. Forget about reading that, but look for this. And this is a very interesting set of ideas that we think, okay, this is just how maybe organizations do budgeting. And it is. So how can we move away from that annual guesswork of guessing the budgeting for next year, but also how can we allow for funding models that are more supporting of learning during the year. So we are learning where we should be putting money, not guessing from now what we will be putting money in a year's time. So this is a very, very interesting idea. So take a look at this work. It's very inspiring and I think very important to solve a key problem on return on investment that's in organizations. At this point, I already mentioned it in a few slides back. So how can we think in terms of return on investment and allow for teams to learn from each other? So how can we make learning a fundamental and strategic investment that helps the whole organization to become better? So like the picture I showed you before, how can we allow a team that knows about something to actually go and spend time helping other teams that are lacking that knowledge? Because then as a whole, we will be doing better. How can we allow for that to happen? And I will go quickly because I think we are almost running out of time, but this is an idea that probably some of you already heard about the Toyota production system and the idea of continuously learning. So one of the key things at the Toyota production system was if a problem was happening in the production line, they would stop and understand what's going on here. So they would take the time to understand what's wrong, take the time to learn, take the time to disseminate that learning so that we would never have that problem again. So we would stop and learn and then be able to do better next time. So we are always improving the system together. Avraham.
Okay, so to sum up, we discussed culture, structure, return on investment, challenges, and practices, good practices. One way to increase the address complexity and the increasing rate of change is by learning and learning as an organization. That's how we address complexity. There are many other ways to address complexity. Shin told us about them this morning, but one of them is organizational learning. A learning organization will be more effective and more efficient. More effective means you get more done. More efficient means you get the right things done. And learning is about more than information flow, about how does information, because learning is not about information, it's about assimilating the information. So that's all we had to, we briefly described that to some extent.
Yeah, and this is our last slide. So it's just to reiterate. So these are three angles that we consider to be very, very important to build that organizational brain, to be better at organizational learning. So the culture aspect, so how can we allow for a culture where learning is something that we reward, that we value. The structure aspect, it's really about how do we evolve our structures so that learning is something that happens and it's not something that we need to fight for. So how do we get rid of that friction to learning? And we see a lot of this these days, right? So we broke the dev and the ops. Now we are bringing product in. We see more and more people. I'm working with a client where we are trying to work better with marketing, sales, with other functions that are really important on those streams of value that we want to create for our customers. And last but not the least, the return on investment. Because at the end, those annual budgets, they will block our ability to actually invest on learning. So how can we make something better on that angle too? And this was us. So thank you very much. Here you have our contacts. And yeah, we will be around if you have questions and or you want to chat about something on your own context. Yeah, feel free to reach out.
I had a teacher that used to say that when the bell rings, it doesn't mean that you stop learning. It means that the learning goes from the classroom to the play yard. So thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody.